To build up my dad's office, I needed to cut a series of 3/4 inch thick dados on the base pieces of the plywood. My table saw only has a short arbor, so I can't really get a dado stack in there. I have a little bitty dado stack that only cuts dados up to 3/8 inch wide, so I needed something thicker, so I decided to use my router. I decided to turn to YouTube to get some ideas and some suggestions and see what I should do, and I came across a plethora of a lot of cool videos and things to make. Some of the easiest ones that I modeled my design after were primarily almost made it exactly like the video by SailingandSuch. I'll post that link down in the description. Another one that this kind of closely resembles a little bit would be Jay Bates' video. So I'm going to walk you guys through this process, and I'll point out some errors and things that I made throughout and ways that I would have fixed the problems had I done it again. I started out by cutting 2 strips of MDF about 2 inches wide, and kind of whatever length you desire. Mine were about 39 inches. That's just the piece of MDF that I had. Then now I'm cutting 2 strips of MDF that are about 5 inches wide. The width of the top piece doesn't really matter too much as long as it's at least about 1.5 inches, so that way you've got something to clamp to. The width of the wider boards that are going to be on the bottom are really important. That needs to be the exact width of that top board, plus the distance from the center of your router collet all the way to the edge of your router, and that's really important. I'll explain why in a second. The last piece that I'm cutting is about 2 inches wide. This really doesn't matter too much. I mean, around the 1.5 to 3 inch range is good. These are just going to be edge guides that are going to be on the side of your jig. After making the cuts, it's time to glue up the smaller width board to the wider width board, just on the edges there. It's not real important that you get it all the way up to the edge or that they're sitting nice and flush. Don't spend too much time on that, because you're going to cut away part of that bottom wide board with your router, and that's going to be your reference, and straight edge in order to square up the other sides. I countersunk and screwed all these boards together, but I could have just as easily done it with a brad nailer. The most important step in putting this jig together is making sure those top boards are straight as an arrow. I failed to do that, and as I clamped them down and screwed them down, there was just a little bit of a curve in the middle of the board. It was only about a 1/16 of an inch or so from the edge of the board to the center, but it makes enough difference to where I don't have perfect fit dados. When using this jig, it's really important to have the exact same width router bit in every single time you cut dados. This step in the process is meant for shaving off that excess on that MDF. If you use different size router bits to cut each dado, you're not going to be aligned with that guideline on the edge. Using that guideline that you just cut, you can send both pieces to the table saw to cut off the back and clean it up a little bit. I also decided to square up both ends on the miter saw. Not real important, it's just for looks. Now it's time to attach the edge guides. It's honestly not really that important if these are square or not, because that guideline on the inside part of your router jig is going to tell you exactly where you're going to need to cut and align your markings with. Here's that error I was talking about earlier. Because I didn't ensure that those top boards were straight as an arrow, when I cut the excess off of the bottom boards with the router, I get a little bit of a curved cut. Now it's time to make a sliding slot in those bottom edge guides. What I did is I closed up the jig all the way, drilled some holes, and opened it up all the way, drilled some more holes. That way I could mark some lines to see where my channel would go. With a scroll saw, jigsaw, or any other tool that you can use, go ahead and cut out those pieces of wood so that way you've got a nice channel to be able to slide some bolts in. I forgot to hit record on this previous step, but before you start cutting with your router, make sure you go ahead and squeeze a test board, whatever board is going to go in the dado, in between those 2 pieces in the jig, so that way you've got a nice fit before you start cutting. Now you can take a pass hugging one side of the jig and then take the second pass hugging the other side. For my very first cut with this jig, it actually wasn't really that bad of a fit. Here's where that error really comes into play. As you can see a little bit further down the board, there's a tiny gap, about a 32nd of an inch. For rushing through it, it really wasn't that bad of a build. It worked out pretty well with cutting the dados. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, build one of your own, subscribe for more woodworking videos, and I hope to get you guys in the next one. Thanks.